Mauritius, February the 7th, 1810. The French are trying to escape from these two islands so they can get up to the happy hunting grounds up in the Bay of Bombay. And the Ceylon is the first to try to run the British blockade. These little shaded areas are British ships on the prowl for French ships. And as you can see, the Ceylon set out from La Réunion on February 7th, and they made it right up to here in the very last part of the day, in the very evening hours. They ran into the Boetica and the Sirius. The Boetica and Sirius were off, were kind of just cutting across, and the Ceylon, seeing them, decided, whoa, I can't go north. I better race off to the west. Now, Réunion is, it turns out, 420 miles from Madagascar. And I had been playing this entire campaign saying, Madagascar is way over there. They're not going to factor in. It's way over there. But if you stop and think about it, I realized with the winds coming out of the east by southeast, 420 miles is only 14 centimeters. So I got to zoom out now to show you what that looks like. From coast to coast, 14 centimeters, it's really not that far. So I thought to myself, this makes things very interesting. I thought I was going to throw miniatures down on the table today, but we're not going to do a shooting match. We're going to do one of those long, drawn-out chase scenes. Y'all have seen Master and Commander. You know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, Hearts of Oak gives you the ability to do that. I should point out that Heart of Oak has 3 different scales. It's got the strategic scale, which we've been doing. It's got the shoot 'em up scale, which is 1 millimeter equals, I think it's like 1 yard, might even be 1 foot. And then it's got an intermediate kind of in between. So in this case, 1 centimeter, see there you go, 1 centimeter is 50 kilometers or 30 miles if you're a normal person. And that in between scale, because you're dealing with a different ground scale or ocean scale, as the case may be, you deal with a different time scale. So where you may be dealing with minute by minute action when you're coming to grips with each other and shooting cannons at each other, and where you're doing more of a day-to-day scale, the little hash marks here are every half hour. And you can actually zoom in a little bit further to play with half-hour turns. I'm not going to do that, which may be of some benefit to the British. It may be of some benefit to the French. I'm not going to think about that. I'm really just chiefly interested in what happens next. And I want to get there as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do is posit that the French are going to lay all possible sail. Remember that if you're sailing with the wind at your back, you travel a total of it's actually 58 millimeters a day. And that's where this comes in. See, there's 1. And when the Ceylon set out, there's 4. And then they can travel another, like I said, 58. So they travel to somewhere in there, right about here. Wait a minute. Right. This is where they started from. So it was actually 3 and then another 28. And had they not run into the British, they would have wound up right there on the British track. But because the British are there, they said, whoop, we got to turn off in this direction. And they just barely encountered them. And the British kind of are ahead of the game. So that does kind of change things. Essentially, what I'm going to do is posit that the British are able to close to within 1 mile of the French before the French finally just get right past them, right? By the time the British cut them off at the pass, we're going to be right here on the edge of the table. And I went ahead and just measured out to see what Madagascar would look like in scale. And there's a whole lot of markings here. We'll talk about what those mean. I wanted to kind of lay things out and figure them out, do the numbers, run the math off camera, and then show you. So Madagascar, kind of something like this. Of course, it's a jagged coastline. There may be some ports there, but the French aren't going to go to the Madagascar coast. The problem that the French have, the French captain has orders to get that direction. He's got to sail north so he can pick up the winds that will take him back to the east. This means he has a very limited amount of time in which to escape. We can start thinking about the difference between day and night. Remember that as the British are sailing, this right here is the end of the day on the 8th. Wait, they set sail on the 7th, and this is on the 7th. I'm sorry, the 8th here is at basically, did I do that right? Because the British started here. And on day 1, they wind up there. So yeah, this is them sailing on the 8th. So this is midnight, the end of the day on the, so we start here on the 7th, and then this is where things start at the 8th. Now in this case, the French need to outrun the British. So they're going to go hell-bent for leather. And when you do that, you get a 20% bump in your speed. The British are going to try to keep pace overnight. And they know that the French are going to use all the wind they can. They're going to keep the wind right behind them. And this is the interesting thing about wargaming naval games. There's a lot of math involved. There's a lot of interesting math. There's a lot of second guessing and a lot of guesswork. And we've all seen the movies. Hey, nighttime, you can't see the ship. They're going to put out all the lights and they're going to veer off to one side or the other. Well, maybe they will, but not if they're too close to pursuit. Pursuit will be able to hear them. They'll be able to kind of see them. I don't know what the moonlight is like. Basically, the British are going to say, we're going to play it a little bit safe. We're going to bump our speed up by 10%. We know we're going to fall a little bit behind, but we're going to hope that the French have made a terrible blunder. And so that's where all of these nice little markings come in. See, there's a 20% chance overnight. So I said, well, okay, if the French are sailing with that 20% bump, instead of about 6 centimeters, they're going to be sailing at about 72. So that's going to put them, right about here. At midnight the next night. And of course, as soon as the sun goes down, this is where the French have no choice. They have to make one of 3 routes. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. They may not even make it that far. Because when you lay on all that sail, you have the difficulty. You have a 20% chance. Yeah, you go 20% further, but there's a 20% chance that you encounter some troubles. There is a chart in Heart of Oak that we're going to take a look at here momentarily. But that chart has a 10% chance of affecting each of the British vessels as well. So even if the French break down, the British might too. And the whole thing gets really complicated. We really have to play it all out. But just to tell you where my mind is at here, the French, if they survive the night, if they can build up enough headway, then they're going to wind up basically, the British, as it shows here, they're going to be moving 6, but they get the little bump as well. So they're going to wind up right about here. Okay. And 66, is that about right? I think I did that right. So they get the 10%. They're going to be right behind them. Actually, 72. Now that I look at this, they're going to be about 6 millimeters behind. And I think this is this distance here from, and we'll use this pencil for our pointer, from this circle. This is the British circle, and this is where the French are going to veer off. And they have 3 possibilities. They may veer off slightly and cut back across, hoping that the British sail way up. They may just immediately break to the north. Now they will have the wind slightly at their back. Maybe they'll be sailing a little bit slower, but in the strategic game, they're going to be sailing in this direction, and that'll put them right about here. So this is the end of the 3 possibilities. Splitting the difference, they're going to go up this way, and then that's as far as they go. So all 3 of these lines are about the same distance. This one's shorter, of course, because that last leg is sailing directly into the wind. They're hoping that the British will hair off to the north, and the French can kind of slip around behind them and lose the British in all this track. Okay, now that's if they survive the first night. For their part, the British are going to use the same numbers. This is a bit of a guessing game. There's a fox and a hound, if you will. So the British, I'm going to roll 3 times, and the British are going to park themselves. Well, this is the Sirius. They'll park themselves here at dawn, hoping just in case the French veer off to the south. They'll park themselves right here, and remember they have a 6 millimeter view. So I've measured these to be about 12 millimeters apart. That means this 12 millimeters is covered, and this Sirius will stop right about here on a roll of a 5 or a 6. So we have 3 random chances, right? 1, 2, 3 for the French, 1, 2, 3 for the Sirius. I should say the Ceylon. 1, 2, 3 for the HMS Sirius, and 1, 2, 3 for the HMS Boetica. Now, it could be, and this is where, maybe they're signaling to each other, as they're pursuing the French and kind of keeping them on this track as long as possible. But, not to get too bogged down in the details, right? This is essentially what the situation looks like. And I think you understand where we're going with this. So why don't we go ahead and break out the percentile dice. And remember, this 20% is not 20% that they completely break down. It's 20% chance that they have to roll on a chart in Heart of Oak. So we'll start by rolling for the French. We have a 20%. Look at all the bird dander. Oh my God, all these little feathers. Okay. 20%. All right, so we 39. So the French did not break down. What about the Sirius? 10% chance. 26, they did not. And what about the Boetica? 79. So nobody breaks down, and that's going to take us to these red dots here. But just for the sake of completeness, why don't I go ahead and show you what the breakdown chart looks like. It's this mast falling. Essentially, you strained the mast, you took on too much sail, and it was a problem. So that if you're moving at the rate, right? So then you roll on this. Mast falling 1. If ship is moving, roll on the following table. On the first turn, the sail is raised, and subsequently every turn the ship is fired upon. Ooh. Well, in this case, if we had drilled down to the half hour and we were pursuing things at that level, I would be rolling every half hour. And again, there's 6. Well, I'm assuming there's 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. So if we're rolling every half hour, that'd be 24 rolls. They're going to break down. So instead, I'm going to keep it at the day rate. Okay. And now that the British have fallen astern, and the British are a little cocky. They let the French get away because they know they don't have very far to run. But this is what it would look like. If the mast falls, then there's a little bit of modifiers to the mast fall. There's 10% chance it falls. But that's the chance that it does. What happens if it does? Oh, right. If it does, then you have to roll on this chart. There's additional modifiers for how stiff the wind is, and we're somewhere moderate. I'm not going to worry about that. Once you've calculated those modifiers, this is the result. You roll to find out which of your masts was damaged, and so for a 3-masted ship, like all of the ones we're dealing with right here, there's a 25%, 50, and 25% chance that you lose your foremast, mainmast, and mizzenmast, and you lose this much movement. So this means your maximum speed drops to that much, and that would have serious ramifications for the tabletop fight. Here's an example of the Boetica. Well, let's actually take a look at the Ceylon, which I think we've seen before in Blood, Bilge, and Iron Balls. This is the rules that I use for the tabletop battles. You have these sails here, right? And so we would just knock off whichever one of these. We would reduce their campaign speed by that 25, 50, or 25%. And then we would also knock these off for the battle itself. And that's important because if you only have 2 masts, take a look at the start of the battle, even under full sail, the Ceylon here, see, it says right there, and even got the French flag on it, will be moving at 5 inches or 9 inches at full sail. So they start off with that damage, and that can't be repaired in the battle. It can be repaired at sea, but then you're a sitting duck. Not a good thing if you are the French and you're trying to escape. Lucky for them, their masts held up, they've left the British behind, and now we get to check and see where these ships wind up. So I can roll first for the French to find out where they wind up. And again, remember, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So with a 5 and a 6, they got clever. They decided to double back. Their route is going to and then they're going to have to crawl their way out this way. Okay, upwind is going to be an issue, maybe far enough that they can then cut back with the wind at their back and just start blitzing up north. So we have to check now to see where does the Sirius wind up and where does the Boetica. So let's roll for the Sirius first. We get a 3, so the Sirius is going to be right in front of them. See this S3, 4? The worst possible result. And then for the Boetica, they roll a 3, so they will wind up way over here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the Boetica is going to sail, and dawn, the sun rises with the British right in front, and they've got the weather gauge. And now the Ceylon is in big trouble. And this is where we measure as the sun comes up. Sail ahead. The British are going to capture, well, not capture, they're going to be able to force battle with the French ship. Now, bear in mind, the interesting thing here is that we can check the distance. It probably would have been better for the British if the Boetica was here or here because they're closer. As things stand, they're going to be 60 miles away, which is probably going to be way too far to have an effect on this battle. It's too far to hear the gunfire. It's too far. They may decide after a couple of hours, they may be able to slide down, but the action's really going to be over by then. depending on what happens on the tabletop, what this does for our tabletop game, which I guess we'll get to next week. Hey, you got to be patient, right? Naval wargaming is all about those long marathons. You think it's bad, you got to wait a week. These guys had to wait a whole 2 days to find out if they were going to fight and die. So look at that. We're going to start off about 3 miles separated. See, there's the half centimeter at the start of the day, with the British having the weather gauge and the French. Do they fight it out? Well, think about that. The French don't know where the Boatica is, but the British probably do. Maybe they raised sails and said, let's go here and here. They stayed kind of up more to the north. They knew what they were doing. And so after a couple, I guess the big thing is the French are not going to be able to, well, if they try to escape to the northwest, they're going to run into the Boatica. That could be a problem for them. Of course, they don't know about that, do they? The French, of course, will sail north, trying to get ahead of, knowing that it's hopeless and getting ready for battle. The British will move to head them off, and this is after an hour. So after an hour, the Boatica realizes nothing's happening, and I'm going to just put down 3 arrows. Do they sail towards the land? Do they sail towards the Sirius to rendezvous with them, or do they cut back in this direction? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's find out what they do. With the result of a 4, they're going to start moving directly towards the battle. Now, they start doing that. And it's going to take them, the better part of the day to get down to where the battle is. In fact, they're probably going to get to about here. And the sound of the guns will carry about 3 to 6 miles, I guess. So, ultimately what I'm trying to get at here is it's going to take them a third of the day. That's an 8-hour journey before they get down. Well, before they get down to the point, maybe it's like 6 hours. So that's why I don't think the Boatica is really going to factor in, except that it kind of screens off this area to the east for our fight. Meaning, if the French do wind up having to sail off to the east, they're going to run into the Boatica. So 2 fresh ships, the Ceylon and the Sirius. Now we actually do have a fight, and that fight will happen on so that was the 8th, 9th. So the 7th is day 1. Day 2 was the 8th. So this is going to be the fight on the 9th. So we draw this time for real, guys. Next week we're going to do this battle, and that battle is going to take place on February that's dawn on the 9th. I think I got that right. Hey, whatever. At least we have a tabletop war game to fight to the finish. And I'll have to look up what the scale is. I've done this before for Blood, Bilge, and Iron Balls, and I've compared it to the ground scale for this, and I think they're pretty similar. So next time we meet, we're going to see the big blue mat, and we're going to see these delightful little ships from tumblingdice.co.uk. Till then, I'm praying for you.